Hello and welcome everybody. We are very happy to have Lynda Holt here today with us. Lynda is CEO of Health Service 360 and has a clinical background in emergency care. Lynda has spent the last 19 years working with leaders, health professionals and difference makers in health care organisations, helping them to make tangible change through empowering people and focusing on patient experience. Her development work is steeped in neuroscience and focused on practical growth. She is the co-creator of the Movement, author of several books, and has served as a trustee for a number of health-related charities. Hi, Lynda, would you like to start?
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here. There we go. Sorry, I'm just fiddling with my screen. I haven't got it all. So I want to talk this afternoon about story and about how your story creates your future, if you like, and how it really impacts on the reality that you experience, not just in your working life, not just in healthcare, but across the whole of your life. And this story, this conditioning, starts from arguably before we're even born, but certainly from when we are born. And very often the stories that we adapt, the stories that we create, the stories that we constantly tell ourselves are not the stories that empower us, that enable us to be the very best versions of ourselves, or the stories that allow us to show up and make the impact in healthcare that we perhaps think that we're going to make when we first start out on our journey. And so one of the things that I really want to get across this afternoon is that most of this stuff is in your control. Most of this stuff you can do something about with a bit of conscious effort and a lot of trust in yourself. So that's what I want to share a little bit about. I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the neuroscience around story. I'm going to talk about the sorts of stories that you have and that you show up with, and then I'm going to talk about how you craft the story that helps you build the future that you really want, and how that impacts on healthcare, the kind of healthcare system that you want to work in. So here we go. One of the things that is really important to think about is how we're conditioned from a really early age. You know, school was about fitting in, it was about conforming, it was about doing what we're told to do. It wasn't about being creative, being even intellectual, growing. It was very much about industrialization and teaching people to stand on a production line and do what they're told to do. And not much has changed, although the world that we live in has changed exponentially since then. You know, we're not in an industrial age anymore. And this conformity no longer serves us. What this conformity does is it perpetuates cycles and behaviors that might have been fit for the 20th century are not so good in the 21st century. Most of this is pre-digital. And a lot of people that work in the health service are not digital natives either. You know, in many ways, the future of the health service is digital, and a lot of us are playing catch up. But I think where it really, really hurts us as health professions and as human beings is in the stories that we tell, ourselves about who we are, what we're able to achieve, where we need to be if we want to get on in our relative professions, if we want to stay safe, if we want to be liked and popular. And so rather than bringing all of ourselves to the party, rather than really rocking up, connecting with one another and being the best possible human being we can be, we simply learn to fit in. We learn what we need to do in order to appear to be successful in our respective professions, appear to be successful in our lives, and to be the person that everyone expects us to be. This is really, really bad for our mental well-being. You know, we're all somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's friend. We've got colleagues in our respective student cohorts. We've got colleagues in our work placements. You know, many of you will have had lots of other life experiences that you're bringing into your healthcare studies. You know, ultimately we'll be people's wives, people's husbands, people's mothers, people's fathers, all sorts of roles that we learn to play in life. And in those roles, we start to tell ourselves stories about who we are, about what is possible for us to do, to achieve in our lives, what is important in the context in which we're showing up. And we sometimes forget to actually be ourselves. You know, every single one of us is on this planet with some unique purpose. Every one of us is on this planet with a contribution to make, a difference to make. And I think those that go into the health professions, whatever profession you're in, probably feel that sense of purpose from quite early on in their careers, because, you know, let's face it, there's lots of places we could go if we wanted to earn more money. There's places we could go if we want more status, you know. Whether you're a doctor, a nurse, an AHP, you know, we're here because we want to make a difference. We're here because we have a contribution to make. And I think that's true wherever you are in your journey. You know, it isn't something that magically appears when you qualify. It's the stuff that gets you into the profession in the first place. And I think what I want to make really clear at the beginning of this presentation, and I'll be talking about again a bit more at the end, is that you're the future of this profession, of the health service generally, our respective professions. Not me, not the people that you hear on these lectures, not your lecturers, not the people in your placements, you guys. And you know, our role now is very much about enabling. It's enabling you lot to show up in your own imperfect glory and to take the health sector on its next stage of its journey. And in order to do that, you've got to learn how not to fit in. You've got to learn which rules are there for patient safety, for your safety, and that have to be followed, and which can afford to be bent a little bit around the edges. Before I get kicked off air, I'm not suggesting for a second we all go out and cause complete anarchy. And if you have any questions or any comments, do drop them into the Q&A box, and I'll pick them up as I'm going along. You know, but actually, just by following the rules, all that happens is that we engage in what I call the daily struggle. The daily struggle is about getting into a comfort zone. It's about doing what we've always done. It's about not rocking the boat. It's about being the person that you need to be, maintaining the status quo, and not always realizing that there is even a different way. You know, I bet you've all had these experiences in your workplaces, and I certainly remember it from when I was a student, which is more years ago than I'd like to remember. You know, I spent 15 years in frontline emergency care, and the most important thing that I learned in that journey was that I'd got a lot of unique skills that didn't suddenly on me the day I became a registered nurse. You know, there was experience, was childhood experience, all of those things, all of the ways I communicated with people were the things that really served me in emergency care. Yes, of course the medicine was important. Of course the stuff that I needed to know in order to make people better was important. But the connection, the story, the human to human contact, that was the single most important thing. That was the thing that helped me get to be the national lead for emergency care for a number of years. And that happened because I didn't settle for the daily struggle. That happened because I realized that if I believed in something and that belief was infringed, I had to do something about it. I couldn't just sit there and maintain the status quo and maintain the status quo. And here's where we start with the neurology bit. You know, from your brain's point of view, it wants to keep you safe. It doesn't want to give you a happy, fulfilled life. It wants to not rock the boat. So what you did yesterday has kept you alive today. What you did today has got to keep you alive for tomorrow. So if we keep doing the same stuff over and over again, if we get rituals, if we get habits, if we get ways of showing up that we survive through, then actually that's our best course of action from a neurological point of view, because we're not in any danger. We don't upset our neurochemical balance too much. We just live a life of quiet desperation. And that's no good for anybody. And it's certainly no good for your career, for the health service, and for all the people that you're going to serve throughout that career. And it's no good for you as a human being either. What that leads to is settling. It leads to dissatisfaction, disempowerment. And there's just this feeling in life that there's more, but you can't quite grasp it. And the attrition rate from the health sector is phenomenal. I shouldn't be telling you this at the very early stages of your careers, but that attrition rate, I believe, is phenomenal because people can't live their best lives, because they don't know this stuff about story. They don't know how to change a system that doesn't work for them. So they have two choices. They burn out, or they leave, or they just settle and fit in. None of that is good for you as a human being. None of that is good for our respective professions, and it's certainly not good for the people that we serve. Our brains are set up for social processing. Now, what social processing is about is who am I, how do I relate to you, and how can I better serve and contribute to make sure that I stay fitting in and belonging in this environment. A lot of that, there's been a lot of research done around social processing, and there's a guy called Matthew Lieberman who's written a book called The Social Brain, who led a lot of this work, and it's fairly recent. It's sort of the last sort of 10 years or so. But he found that social thinking, making sense of ourselves in relation to other people, is what we spend most of our unconscious downtime doing. And this works through story. So we tell ourselves stories over and over and over. And if we don't have all the information, we just make the story up. And I think that this is where we start to get into trouble, if you like, with the stories that we tell ourselves. Who here runs some stories about not being good enough in some way? I think most of us do, at least some of the time. And when we run these not good enough stories, what happens is it shrinks our ability to show up, to stand in our own imperfect glory, and to be the health professional or the person that we really want to be in this world. Things that often happen is, I'm just a student, I'm just a this, I'm just a nurse, I'm just a doctor, it's not my job. Whatever, we craft these realities based on the stories that we see other people running. We craft these realities based on that education that taught us to fit in and conform. We base them on our families, our peer groups, our friends, but we don't always stop and think about who we are in that story, because this social processing is about keeping us safe. It's about keeping us part of the pack. So my first quest for you this afternoon is to just stop and think, and you may need to do this after that, because I'm going to belt along. What are the stories that you tell yourself? Do they empower you, or do they keep you stuck? And a lot of us have both, and we should have both. And there are some realistic keeping us stuck stories that stop us doing stupid things like jumping off garage roofs and, or drinking ourselves into oblivion. I worked in Oxford for a long time. We were very, we're very affiliated with Oxford University, and one of our favourite nights in A&E, and I'm being sarcastic here, was May Day, where everyone decided to jump off bridges because it was a student practice to do that. The stories that they told themselves were stories about macho-ness, about empowerment. The reality, the stories that prevailed were those of if you were lucky, sprained ankles; if you were very unlucky, much more significant injuries, because actually the story and the reality were not true. And even people that were in medicine and nursing and knew that if they leapt off a bridge into a shallow river, they were likely to hurt themselves, still managed to kid themselves that fitting in was more important. Fitting in with the social process, the social story, the story of the peer group was more powerful than self-preservation. Because our social brain is so powerful. And the way to deal with this is to bring these stories into our consciousness, to start to be really present to the stories that we tell ourselves, about our peer groups, about our professions, and most critically, about the futures that we want to create. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about 3 types of story. The first is the story that we tell ourselves, and every single one of us has got these 3 layers of story. Every single one of us runs these stories all the time. So just think about yourself and think about the stories that you run while I'm talking. The stories that you tell yourself, which I touched on just now, the stories that you tell yourself about yourself, and these are often stories of lack, but actually, what are the stories that you can tell yourself that empower you to be the person that you want to be? Because we've all got those stories too. You know, you think back through your life, you've all got moments that you're really proud of. You've all got moments where you were just, yes, in that zone, or you've all got experiences of being really elated, really happy. If we told those stories, if we paid attention to those stories, then actually we would constantly empower ourselves instead of constricting ourselves. We've then got the public story. And these make me really laugh because, you know, you've got all this stuff going on in your head, and depending on how you show up, your public story might be somebody will come and say, hi, how are you today? Oh, I'm all right. I'm as well as can be expected. Or I'm awesome. Or, you know, you'll convey what you think that group needs to hear often. Or you might be slightly like me and slightly more rebellious, and you'll say something just for effect. Or, you know, your public story is about impact. But again, your public story isn't always the one that is thought through very much. You know, my public story, a lot of my public story, particularly in my early nursing years, came out of the profession. And one of the things that I noticed really quickly in nursing was this, I'm just a nurse, I can't do this. I'm just a nurse, I can't do this. You know, and when we keep telling ourselves, I'm just a student, I'm just a nurse, it's not my job, you know, actually we start to believe that. And that's really dangerous for the future of our profession. You know, whichever profession you're in, you know, we can't start to believe that we're just a, you know, we always have to be looking for the next step, the next improvement, the next way we can make a difference. And as I said, that's not usually about the medicine. It's no accident that the doctors that get sued the most are those with the lousy bedside manners. You know, they might be brilliant, and surgeons, there's a lot of research been done around surgeons. Surgeons are the best at this. You know, they might actually be fantastic surgeons with really good records, and yet they still get sued more than the mediocre surgeon that's got a really nice bedside manner, because people connect with people. People will cut you very much more slack if they've connected with you as a human being. And this is where your public story becomes incredibly important, because if you know, one of the things that we tend to do is we put on a mask and we protect ourselves and we distance ourselves a little bit. And, you know, often we're taught this, you know, early in our clinical placements and stuff, that just putting that a bit of space between you and what's going on is a great protection mechanism. It isn't. It changes your story. It changes your perception of who you should be. And it stores up a whole load of damage for the future, because you can't live that lie. Third story, which is the most important story for me, is the story that you need to tell. And the story that you need to tell is about the future that you want, because we create our realities. What our brain focuses on is what we're consciously thinking about. And you know, and this isn't an anatomy and physiology lesson about the brain, but the reticular activating system will look for whatever you are consciously focused on. So if you're looking at stories that are disempowering you, you're constantly looking for evidence to prove yourself right. That's bonkers. You know, by any stretch of the imagination, that's a bonkers way of living. If you're looking at the story that you need to tell, you know, that actually I might be a student, but I can make a difference here and I can make a difference here, and this is how I do it, then you're constantly looking for evidence to prove that too. So, as I said a few minutes ago, have a look at the stories, the stories that you are telling yourself. The chances are you've got some that you really like, and you've got a whole lot that you think, do you know what, these stories don't help me very much. You've probably spent most of your life crafting your stories. And so to say change your story and change your reality sounds very glib. It does sound glib, but it is really possible to do that. And I'm going to give you a really quick whistle-stop tour of how to do that. So first of all, when we start to think about deconstructing stories that don't serve us, these are all these not enough stories, or I'm just a story, or even the stories of this is the way it's done around here. You know, if I had a penny for every time I'd heard that in the various health placements that I was on, in the various health jobs that I've had, in the organisations that I go into now and help to grow and develop, this is the way we do it around here, are probably the most dangerous words that you will hear, because it's that very closed-minded, we're not open to growing, we're not open to new stories, we're not open to changing. So that's one of those stories that for yourself, you absolutely need to deconstruct. So when you come to deconstruct a story that doesn't serve you, the first question is it true? Very often the stories that we carry are not actually true. You know, I was talking to a guy not very long ago who was, you know, running this story of he never gets picked for anything, he's really unlucky and people don't like him. This story came from not being very athletic at school and not getting picked for the football team, and you know, always being the last in that horrendous lineup when you pick the teams. Totally irrelevant to the 50-year-old guy that I was talking to, who was on a board of a health trust. You know, so actually the story's not true, so it needs to go. So if the story's not true, you need to get rid of it. Sometimes the stories are true, but they actually don't serve you. So, for example, could I run a marathon? Well, right now, no, I couldn't. You know, could I run a marathon? It's no good just changing the story to, yes, I can run a marathon, because that's not true. Right now, where I stand now, no, I couldn't run a marathon. But the story of not running a marathon wouldn't serve me if I wanted to run a marathon, because I'm defeating myself before I've even got started. So it might be true, but it doesn't serve me. So I have to then reframe it into, what story do I need to tell? The story I need to tell is, it's possible that I could run a marathon with the right amount of training, with a long enough lead-in time, and with some concerted effort into being able to do that. So this deconstructing stories really is a reframing exercise. It is it true in the first place? And if it isn't, replace it with what is true and look for the evidence for what's true. Does it serve me? Yes or no? If it doesn't serve you, then what do you need to tell that does serve you, that helps you to get to where you're going? In the health service, that might be that if you rock up and you don't like something, that actually the story you need to tell is that with the right amount of knowledge and information, with the right amount of connection with my peers, with the right explanation of why this is so important, I can actually change this practice. When you start to believe that, you start to find the evidence, you start to find the other people that believe what you believe, and you start to be able to build a movement that changes the thing that you don't like. And here's the thing, culture doesn't change because we want it to. Culture behavior and realities change. That's an active process. It doesn't happen by accident. It takes one person and then the next person and then the next person to stand up and gently rock the status quo. You know, in 2020, we've had the most enormous rock of our status quo in the health service with COVID. And it's, you know, stuff's happened this year that we've been playing around with for years. You know, changes in processes, changes in the way we get patients out of hospital, changes in what we can actually manage to do online and virtually. And a lot of these changes are really good. They wouldn't have happened without the sea change that COVID has forced upon us, because culture doesn't change just because we want it to. It changes when we have to change our behaviour. And that's an active process, and that's an active process that you are a massive, massive part of. The thing is, our perception is our reality. What we perceive we're able to do, what we perceive is possible, is what our brain goes out and looks for evidence for. It's what our brain conditions ourselves to believe to be our reality. So why on earth would we condition ourselves to believe that we are juster or that we are not enough? Because that just makes our life so much harder, and it leaves us with this unsettling, is this all that there is? And it strips away, if you like, the light and the fun of these rewarding but challenging professions that we are all in. So I like to trade in the possible. You know, if one human being can do it, then another being can do it. And if we constantly are thinking about what is possible, then we're in that expansive state. We're in that place where we're constantly looking for the next bit of the journey. And you know, we don't have to create a revolution. We just need to take a step, and then another step, and then another step. So I want to leave you with these thoughts. What are the stories that you need to tell to make the impact and the difference in your career that you want to make? Because now is the time to start. It's no good waiting until you are a registrar or a ward sister or a consultant. You know, you start now. You start to learn a way of showing up. You start to learn what cages to rattle, what status quo to rock. And you make that your way of being. You make that your way of showing up. But you can only do that when you get comfy with the stories that you need to tell. And those stories are about you and who you are. Those stories are about your profession. And those stories are about the healthcare system that you want to be in. And you are so much more powerful than you think you are. You are the future of healthcare. So here's my 4 things for you. Stand up for what you believe in, and don't be pushed back by this is the way we're always doing it around here. Be prepared to risk ridicule amongst your peers as well as other professionals in clinical placements and stuff, because you know, it's the rebels, it's the mavericks, it's the change makers that move the world on and on and on and on. We don't get anywhere different by doing the same stuff over and over again. And most of us that had ever made a real impact in our careers have been ridiculed more than we would like to think about. Be prepared to be vulnerable, because people connect with empathy and people connect with you as a human being first, long before they'll ever connect with what you know, what you have to say, what your status is. Basically, our brains process socially. We connect at a human to human level, long before any of the intellectual stuff kicks in. And lastly, be kind. We don't know what is going on in anybody else's life necessarily. We know what they want to tell us, but we don't know everything, whether that be our patients, whether that be our colleagues, whether that be our friends and family. It costs nothing to be kind. And actually, when you're kind, you produce a lot more oxytocin in yourself, which makes you better able to trust, more empathetic. It reduces your own fear around social anxiety. It enables you to connect in groups better, and it builds your resilience, all stuff that you really need in the health service. Every single person in the health sector makes a difference to someone or something, and that includes you. Thank you so much for listening to me this afternoon. It's been a real pleasure being here. Mohammed, I have a question from you in here, or a thank you. And looking at advice I wish I'd given when I was back in training, it was really very much about not conforming, I think. You know, we were very much, and you know, I trained in the 90s, well, late 80s, early 90s, and I've been training ever since, to be fair. You know, I've never stopped learning and training. But we were very much taught then not to rock the boat too much. And I think that was the most disastrous advice I ever got. I never followed it. And I've had a glorious, happy and successful career as a result of it. But I think the most important thing that I wished I'd known was to trust myself, to trust my gut. And if something felt wrong, whether that be clinical or interpersonal or the way we did stuff, then it probably was wrong. And it was certainly wrong for me. So trust myself would be the most important thing. There's lots of tools and resources to help with this. Look at Matthew Lieberman. You're very welcome to join our movement, which is endpjparalysis.org/join. That's a free membership group for health professionals. We also have a Facebook group during which I do a lot of these sorts of sessions, and there's a lot of resources around resilience, self-care, as well as clinical deconditioning, MPJ paralysis stuff. and striking the balance between self and not being too pushy. I think that's something you learn along the way, and it's a difficult balance. But I think again, it is one about decide how much it matters to you. You know, don't fall on your sword for the sake of it. But if something really matters to you, don't torture yourself by not standing up for what you believe in either. I think we are probably out of time, and I can see loads of people have got loads more questions. If you want to drop me an email, my email address is there. That's my Twitter handle, or we also have I'll be popping into the Elsevier Facebook group, so you can pop questions in there. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I don't know if you wanted to come back in.
I just want to say thank you so much, Lynda. That was so inspirational, and I think we've all got something from it. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.